So The Brutalist starring Adrien Brody is finally getting its wide release. Some technical aspects, it's 3.5 hours long. To me, it was like a part 1 and part 2 with intermission. It was filmed in VistaVision. Adrien Brody's character, Laszlo, he emigrates to the US, and that's how the film opens. The film opens in this dark period with a letter being read, and you don't really know where the character is or what is going on. It's hard to tell. It kind of looks like he's moving in and out of corridors. Perhaps he is in a concentration camp. It's very hard to tell. And then all of a sudden, the shot that everyone is going to be talking about is when he comes up to the top of the ship, the light hits, and there's this upside down Statue of Liberty. And you see it in two different angles. You see it upside down and you see it from the side. To me, there's a lot of symbolism in those two shots. The first is it's upside down, and it could be a critique on industrialism, capitalism, just how the U.S. treats immigrants. For example, immigration is always a hot topic. The world knew it was going on. There were concentration camps going back to the early 30s. And if you really want to look at it, most of the world and the citizens in Germany knew exactly what was going on. And specifically Jewish immigrants during that time. As you know, during World War II and really from the 30s to 40s, Jewish immigrants weren't even allowed in the U.S. The U.S. turned ships away, as did just about every country. Even though the world knew it was going on, immigration still was not allowed. The only place Jewish people could go were to kibbutzes by the few in what is now Israel. And even then, they had to make aliyah, it was called. You had to have a gold card. It was very difficult. So while the Jewish people, amongst millions of others, were being slaughtered in concentration camps and being held as prisoners or being used in labor camps or factories, immigration was not allowed. And the first thing Adrien Brody sees finally upon emigrating to the US is sort of like almost, it's amazing, but also like a slap in the face at the same time. Like there is this big structure of Statue of Liberty, freedom, but it's upside down. The freedom is not for him, and capitalism is not for him. He's not wanted in this country. And he will address that later on in the film. But anyway, Adrien Brody, he finally comes through. They arrive in New York. He goes to meet a cousin in Philadelphia who is also a survivor, but he is now Catholic. He's essentially renounced his Judaism to be a part of the population, to assimilate better, to get more business. He's sort of thrown his Judaism and background aside. And they ultimately have a falling out, but the film really picks up where that leaves off, I think, as Laszlo comes to learn more about Harrison and his family, and you really get this duality of industrialism versus immigration versus capitalism versus a lower class, higher versus lower class. He's very well connected, very wealthy. And throughout the movie, there is a lot of commentary about industrialism itself. Even turning this beautiful hill into a monument. There were moments throughout the film where they show the pillars rising, and it almost reminded me of like steel trees, like steel concrete trees all rising from the ground. This once empty hill is now filled with steel beams and corridors. Also, there was this one scene in the film later on where you're following a train. Really, steel and train were two of the foundational pieces to building the U.S. into what it is today. And it's just this really long scene. It's not rushed. And all of a sudden, it just blows up, right? And if that's not a commentary on how industrialism sort of blows up in your face, capitalism blows up in your face, well, there you have it. But these problems persist throughout the film as his wife, Erzsébet, is faced with this dilemma of not fitting in. His niece eventually moves to Israel. They leave the country. There's a lot of commentary about them not fitting in to society. Even like his cousin, Attila, I think it's his cousin, rejects him. And there's all of that sort of back and forth. Even when he's talking to his cousin, his face is blacked out and you can't even make up who he is anymore. And to Adrien Brody, who survived, well, Laszlo, who survived this concentration camp, it's just this constant rejection. He finds himself constantly in a place where he has to survive. He has to somehow pull himself out of the depths of these corridors and darkness. And that's how the chapel is designed. It was designed according to his experience in Buchenwald. As it's revealed at the end, that was his interpretation. It's not revealed until the end because, again, it's about how you interpret it. And that's also a comment from his niece's daughter at the end, where she says it's not about the journey, it's the destination. And it's really, I think, a good idea that they left that to the end, where you're kind of coming to your own conclusions about, you know, what these characters stand for and who they are and what their purpose is. So to me, that was really smart. But the chapel itself, and you come to learn that it was actually designed after the specs of his holding cell or room in the concentration camp in terms of its length and width and its height. As she says, it was very narrow but tall, and then there are these windows where you can see up and out, and the light comes in, and you can kind of have some escape there. But I think overall, the film was very well done. A lot of people are saying part one was a little better than part two, and I guess I can see that, as it kind of felt like this flow and this strong interaction between Laszlo and Harrison, and then you throw in Erzsébet and the niece and just other characters, and it sort of gets jumbled. But again, I think those characters serve a purpose because it is about family, two different families. How one family is this established, typical, wealthy American family, and this other side of it is this family that had to emigrate to the U.S. after going through the horrors of the concentration camp. You don't really know everything that happened previously to arriving in the U.S., but knowing what you know about the concentration camps and how women were treated, I think you can come to your own conclusions about what happened, and also what his pain and suffering was like in a concentration camp, surviving, literally kind of brought back from the dead. I think in terms of all of that, you get a lot of different takes, and I do think all the characters add a certain element to what the film is trying to say, which, again, you come to your own conclusions, but to me, it's about how industrialism and capitalism is for some and not all. And it'll always squash some people and lift others up. And not only that, but specific people. In the film, Harrison is very much a racist. It might not be the most blunt racism, but it's pretty evident. And it's really not hard to tell that he kind of appreciates the architecture and the intellect of his contemporary in Laszlo, but also at the same time, he thinks very little of him, that he's a piece or toy or another building block of his empire that he can toy around and discard. And Erzsébet actually makes a very good point in the film where she says, building this to like a wealthy person like that is like refurbishing a kitchen, a pet project. It doesn't mean everything. It doesn't mean anything almost. It does mean something, but it's just another thing to them. Whereas with Laszlo, it was everything. He was trying to make this bold statement, but I would definitely recommend it, and I hope you enjoy it if you do see it.